The night felt longer than usual, as if time had decided to slow down just to watch him leave. He sat inside his old car with both hands resting on the steering wheel, not moving yet, just breathing. The engine was off. The street outside the small rented house was quiet, the kind of quiet that made every sound inside his head feel louder. A dim streetlight flickered near the corner, lighting the cracked road in a tired yellow glow. It had been flickering for years, much like his life. But tonight he noticed it more than ever. Inside the house behind him were memories he did not want to carry anymore. Some were heavy, some were sharp, and others were soft but painful in a way that never fully healed. He had packed only what he needed. A small bag sat on the passenger seat. No photos, no letters, just clothes, documents, and a phone that had not buzzed in hours. That silence said more than any message ever could. He leaned back and closed his eyes. For a moment he wondered if anyone would notice he was gone before morning. The thought stayed with him longer than he expected. He did not feel angry about it. He felt tired, deeply tired. The kind of tiredness sleep could not fix. For years he had done what he believed was right. He worked long hours, often taking extra shifts when others refused. He paid his bills on time. He helped when he could. He stayed quiet when speaking up felt risky. Somewhere along the way, doing the right thing stopped bringing peace. It only brought more weight, more responsibility, more expectations. And when he finally needed something for himself, there was nothing left to give him. He started the engine. The sound broke the silence and echoed down the empty street. No curtain moved, no door opened. No one came running out asking him to stay. That hurt more than he wanted to admit, even though he had already accepted it might happen. As the car rolled forward, he did not look back. He told himself that looking back would weaken his resolve. He needed this. That was the thought he repeated like a quiet promise. He needed space. He needed distance. He needed a chance to breathe, without feeling watched, judged, or needed by everyone except himself. The road ahead stretched into darkness. Did not have a clear destination. It's only a direction. Away from the place where every corner reminded him of something he had failed to fix. Away from the conversations that always ended the same way. Away from the feeling that his life had been decided without his consent. The radio stayed off. Music felt wrong tonight. It's too emotional or too loud. He wanted to hear the road, the hum of the engine, the sound of tires against asphalt. Those sounds grounded him. They reminded him that he was moving, that he still had control over something, as the city lights faded behind him. His thoughts drifted back to how everything had slowly fallen apart. It had not been one big event. It would have been easier to understand. It was many small moments, missed calls, unkept promises, conversations where no one really listened, smiles that no longer reached the eyes, days that felt the same no matter how hard he tried to change them. He remembered a time when he believed effort was enough. If he worked harder, cared more, stayed patient, things would improve. That belief carried him for a long time. But effort without understanding slowly turns into exhaustion. And exhaustion, when ignored, turns into quiet despair. People often told him he was strong. They said it like a compliment, but it felt more like a sentence. Being strong meant not complaining. It meant holding things together even when they were cutting into his hands. It meant being the last one to fall apart, even when he was breaking inside long before anyone noticed. Tonight he allowed himself to feel weak, not in a dramatic way, just honest. He admitted that he did not know what came next. He admitted that he was scared. He admitted that leaving felt like failure, even though staying had started to feel worse. The road curved gently, leading him farther from familiar streets. Gas stations appeared less often. Buildings grew shorter. The night sky opened up, darker and wider, with stars barely visible through thin clouds. He rolled down the window slightly, letting cool air fill the car. It smelled like dust and distant rain. He thought about the people he was leaving behind, not with anger, but with a strange mix of sadness and relief. Sadness for what could have been. Relief that he no longer had to pretend everything was fine. He wondered if they would talk about him after he was gone, or if his absence would quietly blend into their routines. There was one moment, weeks earlier, that stayed with him more than others. He had been sitting at a table, listening to a conversation about plans that did not include him. Decisions about his time, his energy, his future, made as if he were not there. When he tried to speak, the conversation moved on. That was when something inside him shifted, not loudly, just enough to know it would not go back to the way it was. He drove past a sign pointing toward a town he once considered moving to. The idea had felt hopeful back then. Now it felt distant, like a life meant for someone else. He kept driving. Minutes turned into hours. The road stayed quiet. He passed. Only a few cars, each one disappearing quickly into the dark. He wondered about the people inside them. Where were they going? What were they running toward or away from? The thought made him feel less alone, even though he was by himself at some point. He realized he was no longer thinking about what he was leaving. He was thinking about who he might become. That thought was both frightening and freeing. Without expectations pressing down on him, the future felt wide open, but also empty. He would have to decide what filled it. He remembered advice he once received: sometimes walking away is not giving up. It is choosing yourself. He had nodded when he heard it, but he did not truly understand it until now. Choosing himself felt strange, almost selfish. But it also felt necessary. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, revealing the road one stretch at a time. He focused on that. Just the next few meters, not the whole journey, just what he could see. That made everything feel manageable. As fatigue settled in, he pulled into a small roadside stop. It was nearly empty, just a vending machine humming softly and a bench under a broken light. He stepped out of the car and stretched. The night air felt cooler here. He took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. The stars were clearer now. Standing there, he felt the weight of his choice settle fully on his shoulders. There would be no easy explanations. No quick fixes, just consequences, good and bad. He accepted that. For the first time in a long while, acceptance did not feel like defeat. It felt like honesty. He got back into the car and continued driving. The road seemed different now, not kinder, but clearer. He did not know that this night, this decision, would soon collide with something he could never have planned for. He knew was that he had crossed an invisible line. There was no turning back, even if he wanted to. As the miles passed, he felt a quiet resolve settle in. Whatever happened next, he would face it. He had already done the hardest part, had chosen to move. The darkness ahead held many unknowns, but for the first time in years, he was moving toward them on his own terms, unaware that the road was about to interrupt his escape in a way that would change everything he thought he knew about leaving, staying, and the meaning of being seen. The road continued to stretch ahead of him, empty and quiet, like it had no interest in where he came from or where he was going. The night deepened as he drove, and the feeling of distance grew stronger with every mile. The farther he went, the lighter his chest felt, but also the more exposed he became to his own thoughts. There was no one else in the car to interrupt them. No phone call, no message. It's just him and the steady sound of the engine. At some point, the landscape began to change. The flat stretches of road turned into gentle rises and curves. Trees stood closer to the road now, tall and dark, their shapes blurring as his headlights passed over them. The air felt cooler. He adjusted his jacket and kept his eyes forward. Fatigue came and went in waves, but he pushed through it, telling himself he would stop when his body truly needed it. He had not planned this journey in detail. There was no map printed, no hotel booked ahead of time. That lack of planning was not carelessness, it was freedom. For once, he did not want a schedule telling him where to be or when to rest. He wanted to let the road decide the rhythm. His mind drifted back to smaller memories now. The kind that did not hurt sharply but still carried weight. Morning routines that felt rushed even on days off. Evenings where silence sat between people like an unspoken argument. He realized how long he had been living on pause, waiting for something to change without knowing what that something was. He passed a roadside sign, warning of wildlife crossings ahead. He slowed slightly, scanning the edges of the road. The darkness beyond the headlights felt thick, almost alive. He stayed alert, knowing how quickly a calm drive could turn dangerous. Not long after, he noticed a pair of headlights in his rearview mirror. They were far back at first, barely noticeable. He did not think much of it. Cars passed each other all the time, especially on long highways like this one. Still, he checked the mirror again a few minutes later. The lights were closer now. He kept driving at a steady speed, not wanting to draw attention to himself. The other vehicles stayed behind him, not passing, not falling back, just there. He told himself it was nothing. Maybe they were just going the same way. The road narrowed slightly as it moved through a stretch lined with trees on both sides. There were no streetlights here, only darkness and the occasional reflective sign. The headlights behind him remained steady. He felt a small knot form in his stomach, the kind that comes from instinct rather than logic. He reminded himself to stay calm. There was no reason to panic. Still, he adjusted his grip on the steering wheel and stayed focused on the road. After several minutes, the vehicle behind him moved closer. He could now see its shape more clearly in the mirror. It was an SUV, dark-colored, larger than his car. Its headlights were bright but not flashing. Just watching, following. He told himself again that this was probably nothing. But his heart rate increased anyway. The road ahead curved, and as he followed it, the SUV followed too. When he slowed slightly for a bend, the SUV slowed as well. When he accelerated, it matched his speed. He considered pulling over to let it pass. But something stopped him. The road shoulder was narrow, and the area felt too isolated. He decided to keep driving. Minutes passed like this, each one stretching longer than the last. The sense of being watched grew heavier. He did not like it, not after everything he had just left behind. He wanted peace, not another problem. Then, without warning, the SUV's headlights flashed once. His chest tightened. He did not respond. He kept his speed steady and his eyes forward. The headlights flashed again, longer this time. His mind raced through possibilities. Was something wrong with his car? Did he leave a light on? Was there an accident ahead? Or was this something else entirely? The SUV moved into the opposite lane for a moment, as if preparing to pass, then fell back behind him again. That movement made his pulse jump. He did not like the uncertainty of it. He glanced at the fuel gauge. It was still above half. The engine sounded fine. Nothing felt wrong with the car itself. The headlights flashed a third time. This time, the SUV edged closer. He made a decision. He slowed down carefully and signaled toward a wider patch of shoulder he spotted ahead. His heart pounded as he eased the car to a stop. Dust lifted slightly as his tires left the road. The SUV stopped behind him. For a moment, everything was still. The night seemed to hold its breath. He stayed seated, hands on the wheel, engine running. He did not get out. He watched the mirror, waiting. The SUV's engine idled. Its headlights stayed on, washing the back of his car in white light. No doors opened. No horn sounded. He considered driving off again, but something told him to wait. Leaving suddenly might make things worse. After what felt like a long time, the SUV's driver's side door opened. A figure stepped out, tall, moving slowly, not rushing. The person did not approach right away. They stood by the SUV, hands visible, posture calm. That detail mattered. It eased his fear just a little. The figure took a few steps forward, stopping several feet away from his car. They did not knock. They did not shout. They simply waited. He lowered his window halfway, enough to speak, but not enough to feel exposed. The voice that reached him was calm and steady. Not angry, not threatening. They told him there was something important he needed to hear. That they'd been trying to catch up to him for miles because they were afraid he would disappear. Those words hit him harder than he expected. Disappear. He asked how they knew him. The answer was not immediate. The person hesitated, choosing words carefully. They said they knew him from a moment in the past that he might not even remember. A moment he thought was small, but one that changed more than he realized. His confusion deepened. He searched his memory, trying to place the voice, the shape of the person in the dim light. Nothing came to him. The person explained that they were not alone, that others were involved, that stopping him was not about trouble or blame, but about timing, about truth. He felt a strange mix of emotions. Fear had not fully left, but curiosity began to push against it. Why now? Why tonight? Why him? He asked what they wanted. The answer was simple. Almost too simple. They wanted him to listen. The road, which had felt like an escape just hours earlier, now felt like a pause. A moment suspended between leaving and returning. Between running and facing something he had not known was waiting for him. He agreed to step out of the car, keeping his movements slow. The cool night air hit his face as he stood. He noticed the SUV more clearly now. It was clean, well kept, not the kind of vehicle used for reckless behavior. That detail mattered too. The person from the SUV stayed where they were, keeping distance, respect clear in every movement. That respect made it harder for him to be angry. They spoke quietly, explaining that long ago, during a difficult time in his own life, he had crossed paths with someone who was struggling. He had helped without making a show of it. He had not stayed. He had not expected anything in return. At the time, he barely remembered the incident. To him, it had been just another day, another small decision to do what felt right. But to someone else, it meant survival. As the words sank in, the road seemed less dark. The fear eased further, replaced by a growing sense of disbelief. He listened, standing under the night sky, realizing that the life he thought was unnoticed had left marks he never saw. The SUV.
The stop.
The timing of it all felt unreal. Yet it was happening. He did not know yet how deeply this moment would reshape his path. He only knew that the escape he thought he wanted had been interrupted for a reason. The night was no longer just a backdrop to his leaving. It had become the stage for something he had never expected to face. And as the conversation continued, one truth became clear. Some journeys do not allow you to disappear. No matter how far you drive, he stood near the edge of the road, listening as the night wrapped around the quiet conversation. The person from the SUV spoke slowly, choosing words with care, as if each one mattered. There was no rush in their voice, no pressure. That alone made him stay. They explained that years ago, on a day that felt ordinary to him, he had stopped for someone who needed help. It was not a heroic moment. There were no crowds watching. No praise. Just a simple choice made without thinking too much. A short conversation. A small act that cost him little time, but meant everything to someone else. He tried to remember. His mind searched through old days, old roads, old faces. At first, nothing came. Then a faint image surfaced. A roadside. A person sitting on the curb. A broken-down vehicle. A look of fear mixed with pride. He remembered offering help, not money, just assistance. A phone call made, a ride to a safer place. Then he had gone on with his day at the time. He had been dealing with his own problems. Stress, pressure, worry. Helping that person had felt like a distraction, so almost an inconvenience. He remembered thinking about how late he was running afterward. He had never considered that moment again, but the person from the SUV told him that the one he helped was watching him now. Sitting inside the vehicle, quiet, waiting, the thought made his chest tighten. He asked why they had waited until now. Why follow him on this night, on this road? The answer came gently. Because they had been searching for him for a long time. Because they had finally found him. And because tonight, of all nights, mattered more than he knew. He listened as they explained that the person he helped had rebuilt their life. Slowly, with effort, with many setbacks. That small moment of help had been the first time in years someone had seen them as human, not a problem to avoid. That moment had kept them from making a choice they could not take back. He felt something shift inside him. Not pride, not satisfaction, something heavier, responsibility. The person speaking paused, then said something that made his breath catch. They said that the person inside the SUV recognized his car earlier that night by chance. Recognized it from memory. The same model. The same worn marks. They had followed him, unsure at first, then certain. They said they noticed how he drove. Calm, steady, like someone who was leaving. Something behind. That was when they knew they had to stop him. He felt exposed, as if the road itself had seen through him. He asked what would have happened if they had not found him tonight. The person hesitated before answering. They said they did not know, but they believed that timing mattered. This night was not a coincidence. He looked toward the SUV, through the windshield. He could see a figure sitting inside, still, waiting, not watching him closely. But present, he asked if they wanted something from him. Money. A favor. Help. The answer came quickly. No. They only wanted him to understand that his life had meaning beyond what he could see, that even when he felt invisible, his actions echoed further than he realized. The words landed softly, but stayed. For a long moment, no one spoke. The night air moved gently through the trees. An insect buzzed nearby, then faded. The road felt less empty now, as if it had been filled with unseen connections. He realized how close he had come to believing his life had no impact. How close he had come to disappearing. Without knowing what he carried with him, he asked if the person inside the SUV wanted to speak. The answer was yes, but only if he was ready. He nodded. The door of the SUV opened slowly. The person stepped out, not rushing, eyes lowered at first. When they looked up, he felt a quiet recognition, even though the face had changed with time. Lines of struggle and growth marked it, but the eyes were the same. They thanked him. Not with dramatic words, not with tears. Just a simple thank you, spoken with honesty. They said they had wanted to say those words for years, that they carried them through difficult days, reminding themselves that someone once stopped when they did not have to. He did not know what to say. His throat tightened. He nodded, accepting the thanks, though part of him felt unworthy of it. They told him about the life they built after that day. Work found slowly, trust rebuilt carefully, relationships repaired over time. None of it easy, all of it real. They said they were not sharing this to make him feel good. They were sharing it because they sensed he needed to hear it. He felt his eyes burn slightly, but he looked away, focusing on the road. He had spent so long believing he was failing that he had never stopped to measure the good he had done. The person continued, explaining that they now helped others in quiet ways, that they stopped when they could, that they remembered how much one moment could matter. Hearing that completed a circle, did not know existed. The conversation shifted then. They asked him why he was leaving. He hesitated. This was harder to answer. He did not want to unload his story on strangers. But something about the night made honesty feel possible. He said he was tired of being strong, tired of feeling unseen, tired of carrying expectations that were never discussed but always enforced. They listened without interrupting. He spoke about the slow breakdown of his sense of purpose, about giving and giving until there was nothing left, about realizing that staying felt like erasing himself. The person nodded, understanding in their expression. They said that leaving is sometimes necessary, but running without, knowing your worth, can lead to emptiness. Those words stayed with him. They asked him what he hoped to find on the road. He admitted he did not know. Just space, silence, distance. The person gently suggested that space does not always come from miles traveled. Sometimes it comes from seeing yourself clearly. The night felt different now, less heavy. Still serious, but softer. They stood there, together. Three people connected by a moment that had stretched across years. Finally, the person from the SUV said it was time for them to go. They had said what they needed to say. They had done what they came to do. He felt an unexpected sense of loss at the thought of them leaving, as if a door that had just opened was about to close. Before they returned to the SUV, the person he helped looked at him and said one last thing. They said that sometimes people who feel invisible are the ones holding others together without realizing it, and that disappearing would not erase the impact he had already made. The SUV door closed. The engine started. He watched as the vehicle pulled back onto the road. The headlights moved away, then vanished into the darkness. He stood there alone again. But it did not feel the same. He returned to his car slowly, sitting behind the wheel without starting the engine. His hands rested loosely now. His breathing was steady. The road ahead was still there. So was the road behind him. He realized that leaving no longer felt like escape. It felt like a choice that needed clarity as he started the engine and pulled back onto the road. Did not know exactly where he would go. But he knew one thing with certainty. He was not as invisible as he once believed. In whatever direction he chose next, it would be shaped by that truth. He drove for a long time after the SUV disappeared, but the road no longer felt like an escape. The lines on the asphalt moved under his headlights the same way they always had. Yet something inside him had shifted. His thoughts were quieter now, not empty, but settled. The kind of quiet that comes after a difficult truth is finally faced. The night was still deep, but dawn no longer felt far away. He could sense it in the way the darkness softened, in the way the air seemed less heavy. He kept driving until his body told him it was time to stop. When he finally pulled over near a small rest area, he turned off the engine and sat in silence. For the first time since leaving, he did not feel the urge to keep moving. He stepped out of the car and sat on a bench, elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped loosely together. He looked out at the empty stretch of land ahead. Letting the thoughts come without pushing them away, he thought about the moment years ago, when he had helped someone without thinking twice. He had always believed that real impact required big actions, big sacrifices, something visible. But now he understood that quiet moments carried weight too. Sometimes more weight than the loud ones. He realized how little kindness people expected from each other these days, how powerful it became when given freely. That small act had returned to him at the exact moment he believed he had nothing left to give, as the sky slowly began to change color. He asked himself a question he had avoided for years. What did he really want? Not what others needed from him. Not what was expected. What did he want when no one was watching? The answer did not come all at once. It came in pieces. He wanted peace, but not loneliness. He wanted purpose, but not pressure. He wanted to matter without having to disappear to prove it. He realized then that leaving had been a reaction, not a plan. He had driven away because staying hurt, not because he truly wanted to abandon his life. The road had given him space, but the encounter had given him clarity. He thought about going back. The idea no longer felt like defeat. It felt like a choice that could be reshaped. Going back did not mean returning to the same patterns. It meant returning with boundaries, with honesty, with a clearer sense of self. Still, doubt lingered. What if nothing changed? What if he fell back into the same cycle? The fear was real, but it no longer controlled him. He understood now that change did not begin with location. It began with awareness. And awareness had already found him. He got back into the car and continued driving, not away, but forward. The road eventually led him into a small town, just as morning arrived. Shops were closed. Streets were quiet. Life was waking slowly. He parked near a diner that would open soon and sat watching the light grow. He thought about calling someone, then stopped himself. Not yet. He wanted to be sure of his words before speaking them. Inside, he replayed old conversations, seeing them differently now. Moments where he stayed silent to keep peace. Moments where he gave more than he could afford. Moments where he ignored his own needs because they felt less important. He understood that strength did not mean silence. It meant knowing when to speak. When the diner opened, he went inside and ordered a simple breakfast. The warmth of the place, the smell of coffee, the quiet normalcy of it all grounded him. He watched other people come in, each carrying their own unseen stories. He realized how easy it was to assume no one noticed your struggle, and how wrong that assumption could be. After eating, he sat in his car again and finally made the call he had been avoiding. He did not explain everything. He did not need to. He simply said he needed time, but he was not gone forever. His voice was calm, steady. The response on the other end was quiet, surprised, but not angry. That alone told him something important. He ended the call and sat there, breathing deeply. The road ahead was still uncertain, but it no longer felt threatening. He decided he would not rush back, but he would not vanish either. He would take the time he needed, then return with intention as he drove again. The sun rose fully, lighting the world in a way that felt honest. Nothing was hidden now. He knew challenges would still exist. Conversations would be difficult. Changes would take effort. But he also knew he was capable of facing them. The SUV, the stop, the night it all felt like a turning point he could not ignore. By the time he reached the edge of the city he had left behind, he did not feel trapped. He felt prepared. He slowed the car, looking at familiar streets with new eyes. The past was still there. But so was possibility. He understood now that walking away had shown him something staying never could. And whatever happened next, he would not disappear again. He would be present. Fully, honestly, the road had changed him. But it had not ended him. It had simply pointed him back toward himself. He did not rush back into his old life. Instead, he slowed down in a way he never had before. The days that followed were simple, almost quiet enough to feel unfamiliar. He stayed in a modest place on the edge of town, somewhere temporary, somewhere that did not ask questions. Each morning he woke up without an alarm. Each night he went to sleep without replaying the same worries in his head. For the first time in years, his thoughts were his own. He spent time walking, not to get anywhere, just to move. He noticed small things he once ignored. The way the air felt different in the early morning. The sound of doors opening in nearby homes. The rhythm of life continuing without needing his permission. It reminded him that the world did not collapse when he stepped away. And that truth brought both humility and relief. He thought often about the SUV and the people inside it. Not with confusion anymore, but with gratitude. That moment had not fixed his life, but it had shifted his view of it. It had given him something solid to stand on when everything else felt uncertain. He began writing things down. Not plans, not goals, just thoughts. Honest ones. Pages filled with what he felt, what he feared, what he hoped might still be possible. He did not try to make the words sound strong or inspiring. He let them be real. Through those quiet reflections, he saw patterns he had never allowed himself to notice before. How often he avoided conflict to keep peace. How often he gave more than he had, because saying no felt like failure. How often he tied his worth to how useful he was to others. Understanding these patterns did not erase them, but it softened their grip. One afternoon he returned to the road where everything had changed, not by accident, by choice. He parked near the same stretch and stood there, listening to the wind move through the trees. The road looked ordinary now. No drama, no tension. Just asphalt and distance. He realized that the power of that night did not come from the road or the SUV. It came from timing. From being forced to pause when he was most determined to disappear, he asked himself, what would have happened if he had never stopped? If the SUV had never appeared? The answer unsettled him. He might have kept driving until numbness replaced feeling, until distance replaced meaning. That thought alone told him how close he had been to losing himself. As days passed, he began reconnecting, slowly and carefully. Not with everyone, just with those who mattered. He spoke honestly, without blame. He set boundaries without apology. Some conversations went better than expected. Others were uncomfortable, but all of them were real. He learned that being present did not mean being available to everyone all the time. It meant showing up truthfully when it mattered. He returned to work with a different mindset. He still did his job well, but he no longer measured his value by exhaustion. He left on time. He spoke up when something felt wrong. To his surprise, the world did not punish him for it. There were moments when old habits tried to return. Moments when disappearing felt easier than explaining himself. But now, he recognized those urges for what they were. Signals, not solutions. He remembered the words spoken to him on that dark road. About impact. About being seen, even when you feel invisible. Those words became a quiet anchor. One evening, As the sun dipped low, he found himself driving again. Not away this time. Just moving through familiar streets, feeling grounded instead of trapped. He passed the place he once left in silence. It looked the same, but he was not. He did not stop. He did not need to. He understood now that leaving had not been the mistake. Leaving without understanding himself would have been. The road no longer represented escape. It represented movement, choice, awareness. Some nights, they still thought about that SUV, about how close he came to vanishing from his own life. He did not see it as fate or destiny. He saw it as a reminder. Life has ways of interrupting us when we are about to make ourselves small. He began helping others again, but differently this time. Without draining himself, without expecting gratitude, just present, just human. He knew now that small moments mattered, that listening mattered, that stopping mattered, and when he looked back on that night, he no longer saw it as the moment he drove away. He saw it as the moment he finally stopped long enough to understand where he belonged. Not on a road without direction, but in a life lived with intention. The SUV had stopped his car. But it had started everything else. Life did not suddenly become perfect after everything that happened. That was something he learned quickly. The days still had problems. People still misunderstood him at times. Some situations remained unresolved. But the difference now was how he faced them. He no longer carried the same heavy silence inside him. He no longer felt like disappearing was the only way to survive. He began to notice how often he had ignored his own feelings in the past. Not because he was weak, but because he believed that being needed was the same as being valued. That belief had guided many of his choices, and it had also worn him down. Now he questioned it. He spent more time alone, but not in isolation. It was a kind of solitude that allowed him to hear himself clearly. He sat with uncomfortable thoughts instead of running from them. When regrets surfaced, he did not push it away. When hope appeared, he did not doubt it immediately. There were moments when the memory of that night returned suddenly. The road, the headlights, the quiet voices. Sometimes it happened while he was driving, other times while sitting still. Each time, it reminded him that small moments can change. Direction without warning, he began to understand that his life was not defined by one decision or one mistake. It was shaped by a series of choices, many of them quiet, many unseen. That understanding softened his judgment of himself. He reached out to people he had drifted away from, not to explain everything, not to fix the past, but to reconnect honestly. Some welcomed the effort. Others kept their distance. He respected both responses. He had learned that not every door opens again, and that was okay. At work, he continued to set limits. When extra responsibilities appeared without discussion, he asked questions. When expectations felt unfair, he spoke calmly instead of absorbing the pressure. Each time he did this, a small part of him healed. There were evenings when he felt tired in a good way, not drained, just human. Those evenings reminded him that exhaustion should come from living fully, it's not from carrying invisible weight. One weekend, he took another drive. This time, there was no rush, no need to escape. He drove through open roads with the windows down, letting the air move freely through the car. The road felt familiar, but no longer heavy. He stopped at a small place along the way, sat watching people pass by. Families, workers, travelers, everyone moving through their own stories. He realized how close he once came to believing his story did not matter. That thought stayed with him. He thought about how many people might be standing at their own turning point without knowing it. How many were holding everything together quietly, believing no one noticed. He wished he could tell them what he had learned, but he understood that lessons arrive when they are ready. Instead, he chose to live in a way that reflected that understanding. He listened more. He paused when things felt overwhelming. He reminded himself that rest was not failure. Sometimes late at night, doubt returned. Old fears whispered that change would not last, that he would slip back into old patterns. When that happened, he did not panic. He acknowledged the fear and kept going. He remembered that growth was not a straight line. It moved forward, then sideways, then forward again. He also realized that the SUV, the conversation, did not save him. They reminded him that he was already worth saving. That distinction mattered. As time passed, the story of that night became less sharp, less urgent. It settled into him like a quiet truth rather than a dramatic memory. He no longer replayed it constantly. He carried it gently. He understood now that being seen did not always mean being noticed by everyone. Sometimes it meant recognizing yourself, and that recognition changed how he walked. Through the world, he no longer drove to escape. He drove to live, and that made all the difference. Time kept moving, as it always does, but it no longer felt like it was dragging him behind it. Days passed, then weeks, and the changes inside him began to show on the outside. People noticed it in small ways. The way he listened without rushing, the way he spoke with calm instead of tension, the way he paused before agreeing to things that once would have pulled him apart. He did not announce these changes. He did not explain himself to everyone. He simply lived differently, and that difference slowly reshaped his world. There were mornings when he woke up and felt the old weight try to return. It usually came quietly, slipping in through familiar thoughts. Questions about whether he was doing enough, whether people would drift away if he stopped carrying everything, whether this new balance would last. When those thoughts appeared, he did not fight them. He acknowledged them, then reminded himself of what he had already survived. He reminded himself of that night, not as a warning, but as proof that he could stop, reflect, and choose again. One afternoon, he received a message from someone he had not spoken to in a long time. It was not dramatic or emotional, just a simple check-in. In the past, he might have ignored it out of exhaustion or resentment. This time, he responded honestly. The conversation that followed was careful but sincere. Old misunderstandings surfaced. Not all of them were resolved, but they were finally spoken out loud. He realized how much silence had shaped his past relationships, and how freeing it felt to replace that silence with truth. Not every connection could be repaired. Some people were more comfortable with the version of him that said yes to everything. When he stopped being that person, distance appeared. That distance hurt, but it no longer confused him. He understood now that losing connections that depend on self-sacrifice is not failure. It is clarity. He began to spend time doing things he once believed were unimportant. Reading without rushing, sitting outside without checking the time, fixing small things around his space just because he could. These moments grounded him more than any escape ever had. Driving still played a role in his life, but it had changed meaning. He drove to think, to breathe, to notice the world instead of leaving it behind. Sometimes he took the long way home. Sometimes he parked and watched the sky shift colors as evening settled in. On one of those evenings, he passed the same type of SUV that had stopped him months earlier. His heart skipped for a brief second, then steadied. It was not the same vehicle, just a reminder. He smiled to himself, not because of fear or tension, but because of gratitude. That moment no longer carried weight. It carried wisdom. He realized that growth does not erase the past, changes how the past lives inside you. There were still challenges. Work demands increased at times. Family expectations resurfaced. Life tested the boundaries he had set. But each time he responded with awareness instead of instinct. He learned how to say no without anger, how to ask for space without guilt, how to offer help without losing himself. These skills were not learned overnight. They were practiced, sometimes awkwardly, sometimes imperfectly. But each attempt strengthened him. He also learned to forgive himself for staying too long, for leaving without explaining, for believing that his value came only from endurance. Forgiveness did not excuse the pain he felt, but it released him from carrying it forever. One weekend he volunteered to help with a small local effort. Nothing formal, just people helping people. As he worked alongside others, he noticed something familiar, quiet strength in those who showed up, without seeking attention. He recognized himself in them. That realization did not inflate his ego. It humbled him. He understood now that many people walk through life unseen, not because they lack value, but because they carry it quietly. As the day ended, he felt a sense of alignment he had never known before. Not excitement, not relief, just rightness. Later that night, he sat alone and thought about how close he once came to walking away from everything without understanding why. He imagined what his life might have looked like if he had kept driving. The thought no longer frightened him. It strengthened his resolve. He knew now that leaving can teach you things staying never will. But returning with clarity is where real change happens. He did not know what the next year would bring, or the next 5. He stopped trying to predict it. Instead, he focused on being present where he was. That presence became his anchor. People still saw him as dependable, but now they also saw him as honest, calm, grounded. He did not need their approval the way he once had, but he appreciated genuine connection when it appeared. One evening, as he prepared for sleep, he realized something simple and profound. He no longer felt the urge to disappear. The road would always be there. So would the temptation to run when things felt heavy. But now he understood that stopping, listening, and choosing himself was the bravest move he could make. And that understanding stayed with him, quietly guiding each step forward. The SUV had once interrupted his escape. Now, the memory of it protected his peace.